The rust-colored dust of Terrigen 4 swirled in violent eddies around the landing struts of the Galactic Federation survey vessel Horizon. Through the hazy atmosphere, twin suns cast an eerie orange glow across the barren landscape. Jagged rock formations pierced the horizon like the teeth of some ancient predator, their shadows stretching long across the crimson desert floor. Inside the ship's primary research bay, Elena Voss secured the final clasps on her exosuit, the material hissing as it sealed against the toxic atmosphere outside. Her movements were precise, methodical, the practiced routine of a veteran xenobiologist who had explored 17 frontier worlds in her 15-year career. "Final atmospheric composition report," she said, her voice clear through the ship's comm system. "Nitrogen-oxygen base with trace elements of xenon and argon," replied the ship's AI. "Breathable with filtration. Warning: high particulate count may reduce visibility to less than 2 kilometers. Elena nodded, checking the readouts on her wrist display. It was the year 2375, and humanity had spread across dozens of star systems in their relentless pursuit of knowledge and resources. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had earned her place on the most ambitious expeditions, particularly those involving new species classification. "Dr. Voss," a raspy voice called from the corridor. "The Drake survey team is assembled in the cargo bay." Elena turned to see Xavian, the tall, slender, alien representative of the Drake species. His scaled skin shimmered with iridescent blues and greens under the ship's lights, the gill-like structures on his neck pulsing gently as he breathed the ship's air. "Thank you, Xavian. I'll be there momentarily." The Drake nodded, his elongated head dipping in a gesture of respect. The Drake were among the first alien species humans had encountered in their expansion into the stars. Amphibious by nature, they excelled at biological research, their natural affinity for adaptation making them exceptional xenobiologists. This joint expedition represented the best of interspecies cooperation. Drake intuition combined with human analytical methodology. Elena gathered her sampling kit and made her way to the cargo bay. The mission was straightforward: catalog the indigenous life forms of Terrigen 4, assess potential resources, and determine suitability for future colonization. Standard procedure for the Galactic Federation's expansion initiative. The cargo bay hummed with activity as the team of 5 Drake researchers checked their equipment. Their scaled bodies moved with fluid grace, evolved from aquatic ancestors who had mastered both land and sea. Beside them stood Major Hayes, the human security officer assigned to the expedition, a formality that Elena found unnecessary but tolerated. "All systems ready, Dr. Voss," reported Moreau, the Drake expedition leader. His voice contained the characteristic clicking undertones of his species. "Our preliminary scans indicate minimal large fauna activity in this region, primarily insectoid and reptilian analogs." Elena nodded, reviewing the holographic display of their intended survey area, a massive valley system carved into the planet's surface by long dried rivers. "Perfect. We'll establish a baseline at these 3 points," she indicated on the map, before exploring the cavern networks in Sector 7. As the team filed toward the airlock, the ship's alarm suddenly blared to life. "Alert," announced the AI. "Anomalous biological signature detected 2 kilometers east of current position. Mass estimate exceeds standard classification parameters." The Drake team froze, their neck gills flaring in the instinctive response of their species to potential danger. "Display readings," Elena commanded, her curiosity immediately piqued. The holographic display shifted, showing a pulsing red mass beyond the ridgeline to the east. The biochemical signature was unlike anything in the ship's database, a chaotic mixture of elements that shouldn't coexist in a living organism. "Fascinating," she murmured, studying the readings. Moreau stepped beside her, his scaled skin dimming slightly, a sign of concern among the Drake. "Dr. Voss, there are local legends among the nomadic tribes of this sector. They speak of a creature they call the Devourer of Mountains. We dismissed it as primitive superstition, but now you're not so sure. Elena finished for him, a smile touching her lips. This was why she had joined the Frontier Corps, the thrill of discovery, of encountering the truly unknown. We should investigate. With respect, Doctor, Major Hayes interjected, his hand instinctively moving to the pulse rifle at his side. Standard protocol for unclassified entities of that size is to observe from a safe distance using drones. Elena waved her hand dismissively. Major, if I followed standard protocol, we'd still think the crystalline entities of Proxima Centauri were mineral formations instead of sentient beings. Some things require a personal touch. Before Hayes could protest further, she turned to the Drake team. Prepare the rover. We leave in 10 minutes. The massive six-wheeled exploration vehicle crawled across the uneven terrain, its adaptive suspension compensating for the treacherous landscape. Elena sat in the forward observation bubble, scanning the horizon through specialized binoculars that could detect heat signatures and biochemical markers. The Drake team had grown increasingly nervous as they approached the anomaly, their skin colors shifting to deeper blues, a sign of anxiety in their species. Our ancestors told stories of great beasts that dwelled in the deserts of our homeworld, Xavier explained, as they traversed a particularly rough patch of terrain. Creatures that could swallow entire lakes and breathe fire that melted stone. We learned to avoid them at all costs. Human mythology is filled with similar monsters, Elena replied, not taking her eyes from the scanner. Dragons, krakens, leviathans, all representing the unknown, the dangerous. Yet every monster I've encountered has merely been a creature trying to survive in its environment. The rover crested a ridge, and Elena signaled for a stop. Below them stretched a vast canyon of red stone, its walls striated with layers of mineral deposits that glittered in the dying light of the setting suns. The signal is coming from within the canyon, she announced, pointing to a dark opening in the far wall. Possibly a cave system. Moru's neck gills fluttered anxiously. Dr. Voss, our preliminary scans show disturbing evidence in that area. We've detected remains of indigenous fauna, violently dismembered. The patterns suggest predatory behavior on a scale we've rarely documented. Elena studied the readouts, noting the concentration of organic matter around the cave entrance. All the more reason to understand what we're dealing with. Knowledge eliminates fear. Sometimes fear keeps one alive, Xavier countered softly. Despite their protests, Elena directed the rover down into the canyon. As they descended, evidence of massive destruction became apparent. Enormous gouges scarred the stone walls, as if a titanic force had clawed its way through solid rock. Scattered across the canyon floor lay the desiccated remains of creatures, some recognizable from their initial survey scans, others completely alien. The rover's sensors suddenly shrieked in alarm. Movement detected, the vehicle's computer announced. Mass displacement consistent with target signature. A low, rumbling vibration shook the ground beneath them, causing small cascades of pebbles to rain down from the canyon walls. We should retreat, Moru insisted, his voice quavering slightly. Whatever dwells here is beyond our capability to contain if hostile. Elena was about to respond when a deafening roar split the air, echoing off the canyon walls with such force that the rover's windows vibrated. The sound sent a primal shiver down her spine, a sound not merely of aggression, but of territorial dominance. The Drake team recoiled, their skin paling to an almost translucent white. By the ancestral waters, Xavier whispered. It's real. Before Elena could process what was happening, the Drake had activated the rover's emergency protocols. The vehicle lurched backward, its engines whining in protest. What are you doing? She demanded. Saving our lives, Moru replied. His usually calm demeanor shattered. We cannot face the devourer. It is death incarnate. This is a scientific expedition, Elena protested. We can't just run at the first sign of—" Her words died in her throat as a massive shadow fell across the rover. Rising from behind a rocky outcropping was a creature that defied conventional biology. Towering at least 15 meters tall, its body was a sinuous blend of reptilian and crustacean features. Massive armored plates covered its torso, transitioning to iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Multiple limbs, some ending in crushing claws, others in dexterous appendages, extended from its segmented body. But it was the creature's head that truly inspired awe. A crown of sensory appendages surrounded eyes that glowed with bioluminescent light, pulsing with what Elena instinctively recognized as intelligence. "Magnificent," she breathed, reaching for her recording equipment. The Drake, however, had reached their limit. With a final desperate maneuver, Moru overrode the rover's controls and sent it hurtling back up the canyon slope, leaving Elena with only seconds to grab her emergency pack before being thrown against her restraints. "We cannot remain," Xavian cried out. "The ancient texts are clear. No Drake has ever survived an encounter with such a being." "Stop this immediately," Elena commanded. "We're scientists, not cowards." But her protests fell on deaf ears. The Drake's cultural fear had overwhelmed their scientific training, triggering a flight response so powerful that reason could not penetrate it. Making a split-second decision, Elena released her restraints and moved toward the rear hatch. "Dr. Voss!" Major Hayes called out in alarm. "What are you doing?" "My job," she replied simply, keying the emergency release code into the hatch controls. Before anyone could stop her, Elena had leapt from the still-moving rover, tucking into a roll as she hit the canyon floor. Pain shot through her shoulder, but her exosuit absorbed the worst of the impact. By the time she regained her footing, the rover had disappeared around a bend in the canyon, leaving her alone with the massive creature. Alone, but not unprepared. Elena had spent her career studying the most dangerous life forms humanity had encountered. She knew that sudden movements triggered predatory responses, that direct eye contact was perceived as a challenge by most apex species, and that retreat often initiated pursuit instincts. So she stood perfectly still, eyes lowered, as the enormous being approached. The ground trembled with each step as the creature moved toward her. Its breathing, a rhythmic hissing sound, grew louder as it closed the distance between them. Elena could smell a strange metallic odor emanating from its body, like ozone after a lightning strike. Slowly, carefully, she raised her hand, palm outward in a universal gesture of peace. Her exosuit's glove contained specialized pheromone emitters designed to calm various species, a tool she had developed after nearly being eviscerated by a Jovian stingtail on her third expedition. The creature paused, its luminous eyes focusing on her outstretched hand. A deep, rumbling sound emanated from its chest, not quite a growl, more like the sound of distant thunder. Elena took a cautious step forward, maintaining the non-threatening posture. "Hello there," she said softly, knowing her words meant nothing to the creature, but hoping her tone would convey her peaceful intentions. The being tilted its massive head, the sensory appendages around its face undulating in what seemed like curiosity. It lowered its head slightly, bringing its face closer to Elena's level, still towering above her, but no longer seeming to loom quite so menacingly. For a moment, Elena thought she had established a tentative connection. Then, without warning, the creature reared back, its body expanding as it drew in a massive breath. The bioluminescent patterns across its scales intensified, pulsing with alarming speed. Elena had just enough time to dive behind a nearby boulder before the creature unleashed a deafening roar, accompanied by a spray of caustic fluid that sizzled where it struck the stone. The acrid smell of dissolving rock filled the air as Elena scrambled to her feet, adrenaline coursing through her veins. The creature's mood had shifted from curious to aggressive in an instant. Elena couldn't identify the trigger. Perhaps something in her scent, or a movement she had made, or simply the unpredictable nature of an alien intelligence. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. She needed to retreat. Fast. With the practiced movements of someone who had fled from dangerous fauna on multiple worlds. Elena sprinted toward a narrow fissure in the canyon wall. The creature pursued, its multiple limbs propelling it forward with surprising speed for its massive size. The gap was just wide enough for Elena to squeeze through, but far too narrow for her pursuer. She pressed herself into the crevice, feeling the rough stone scrape against her exosuit as she edged deeper into the safety of the rock. The creature's roar of frustration echoed through the canyon as it tried unsuccessfully to reach her with its clawed appendages. Elena used the opportunity to catch her breath and assess her situation. Her comm unit was operational, but the dense mineral content of the surrounding rock was blocking transmission to the ship. Her emergency pack contained enough supplies for 48 hours, including a distress beacon that would activate automatically if she couldn't return to the vessel within 24 hours. Most importantly, her scientific equipment was intact, including her scanner and sample collection tools. Even in potential mortal danger, Elena remained committed to her purpose. She studied the creature from her relatively safe position, documenting its physical characteristics and behavior patterns. The being seemed to operate with more intelligence than a simple predator. Its attempts to reach her showed problem-solving capabilities, as it tried different limbs and approaches, rather than simply repeating the same, ineffective strategy. After nearly an hour, the creature's interest waned. It moved away from the fissure, turning its attention to something else in the canyon. Elena seized the opportunity to slip out of her hiding place and follow at a safe distance, documenting the creature's behavior. To her fascination, the being moved with purpose toward the cave entrance they had observed earlier. As it approached, Elena noticed subtle changes in its physical appearance. The bioluminescent patterns dimmed, and its body seemed to compact slightly, as if conserving energy. The creature entered the cave, disappearing into the darkness. Elena hesitated only briefly before following. Her exosuit's enhanced vision systems would allow her to see in the near-total darkness, and her scientific curiosity overwhelmed any remaining sense of caution. The cave opened into a massive chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie blue glow over the scene. At the center of the chamber was a depression in the floor, filled with a viscous liquid that gleamed with an unnatural iridescence. The creature had submerged itself partially in this pool, its massive body relaxing visibly as the liquid covered its lower portions. Elena realized she was witnessing some form of resting or rejuvenation behavior, perhaps equivalent to sleep for this species. She carefully positioned herself behind a stalagmite formation and continued her observations, meticulously recording every detail in her portable data unit. Hours passed as she studied the creature in its natural habitat, unnoticed and undisturbed, until her equipment slipped from her fingers, clattering against the stone floor with a sound that seemed deafening in the quiet chamber. The creature's eyes snapped open, the bioluminescent glow intensifying immediately. It rose from the pool with frightening speed, liquid cascading from its armored plates as it turned toward the source of the disturbance. Elena had no time to hide. The creature spotted her instantly, its sensory crown flaring in what she now recognized as a threat display. With a roar that shook loose stones from the ceiling, it charged. Elena ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The cave system was a maze of tunnels and chambers, and she had no clear idea of which path led to the surface. She sprinted down a passage at random, hoping to find either an exit or another crevice too small for her pursuer. The creature followed, its massive bulk somehow navigating the tunnels with surprising agility. The ground shook with each impact of its limbs, and its roars reverberated painfully in the confined space. Elena's path suddenly ended at a sheer drop, a massive vertical shaft that plunged into darkness. She skidded to a halt at the edge, pebbles dislodged by her boots, falling into the abyss with no audible impact to indicate a bottom. Behind her, the creature advanced more slowly now, perhaps sensing that its prey was cornered. Its breathing was a harsh rasp that filled the tunnel, and the glow from its eyes illuminated Elena's desperate situation. There was nowhere left to run. In that moment of absolute crisis, Elena made a decision that defied conventional wisdom. Instead of trying to find some desperate means of escape, she turned to face the creature directly. She removed her helmet, exposing her face to the alien atmosphere, filtered through her suit's collar apparatus, but allowing her full, unobstructed vision. She wanted the creature to see her eyes, to recognize her as a sentient being rather than simply prey. The creature paused, seemingly surprised by this unexpected behavior. It lowered its massive head, the glowing eyes narrowing as it studied her with what Elena could only interpret as curiosity. Slowly, deliberately, Elena knelt on the stone floor. She reached into her pack and removed a specialized container, one of her most valuable tools. It contained a synthesized solution of minerals and compounds that she had developed over years of field research, designed to soothe irritated epidermis across a wide range of species. The creature watched, motionless, as Elena removed her gloves and applied some of the solution to her bare hands. The liquid glistened in the bioluminescent light, giving her skin an almost otherworldly sheen. Then, with a courage born of scientific conviction and a lifetime of interspecies communication, Elena extended her hand toward the creature's underside, the least armored and presumably most sensitive area of its anatomy. Time seemed to freeze as the massive being considered this strange, tiny creature before it, this fragile being that neither fled nor attacked, but offered something entirely unexpected. A low rumble emanated from the creature's chest, but it was different from its earlier threatening sounds, lower in pitch, almost questioning. It lowered its body slightly, bringing its underside within Elena's reach. With gentle movements, Elena began to rub the solution into the creature's softer scales. The effect was immediate and astonishing. The being let out a sound unlike anything Elena had heard before, a deep, resonant purr that vibrated through the stone beneath her feet. The luminescent patterns across its body shifted from the aggressive red pulses to a gentle blue wave that spread outward from where her hands made contact. The creature's multiple eyes half closed in what could only be described as pleasure. Elena continued the gentle massage, marveling at the texture of the alien skin beneath her fingers. Despite its armored appearance, the underside scales were surprisingly smooth and warm to the touch, almost like heated silk. As she worked, she spoke softly, continuously, sharing her observations and thoughts as if the creature could understand her words. It was a habit she had developed over years of fieldwork. Speaking her notes aloud helped her remember details later, and the sound of a calm human voice often had a soothing effect on the beings she studied. "Your dermal structure is fascinating," she murmured, fingers working methodically across the creature's belly. These scales appear to serve both as armor and as sensory organs. The way they change color suggests a complex neural network throughout your epidermis. Truly remarkable evolutionary adaptation. The creature's purring intensified, and to Elena's amazement, it slowly rolled onto its side, exposing more of its underside in a display of trust that would have been unthinkable minutes earlier. "You just wanted some attention, didn't you?" Elena said with a smile, moving her hands to a new area that caused the creature's purr to deepen appreciatively. "All that terrifying exterior, and underneath you're essentially a giant, scaly cat." Hours passed as Elena continued her ministrations, taking brief breaks to record her observations and rest her tired arms. The creature remained docile, occasionally nudging her gently when she paused too long between sessions. By the time Elena's suit indicated that nearly 18 hours had passed since her separation from the expedition, she had developed a rudimentary understanding of the creature's communication signals. Certain patterns of bioluminescence corresponded to specific emotional states, and various vocalizations indicated different needs or responses. Most significantly, she had collected valuable biological samples, shed scales, secretions, and even a small blood sample from a naturally occurring abrasion, all obtained without causing the creature any distress. Elena was carefully storing these specimens when her comm unit suddenly crackled to life. "Dr. Voss? Dr. Voss, do you copy?" Major Hayes's voice, tense with concern, broke through the static. The creature's head snapped up, eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar sound. "Easy," Elena soothed, placing a reassuring hand on its side. "It's okay." She activated her comm. "This is Voss. I'm alive and well. Current position unknown, but I'm in a cave system with the unidentified life form." There was a moment of stunned silence before Hayes responded. "You're with the creature. Confirm status." "Not only am I with it," Elena replied, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. "I've established peaceful contact. It's sentient. Hayes. Highly intelligent and capable of complex emotional responses. The Drake delegation is unconvinced," Hayes said carefully. "They're insisting we deploy containment protocols." Elena's expression hardened. "Absolutely not. This being is not a threat, at least, not unprovoked. I'm bringing it back to the research station myself." "That's not possible, Doctor. The creature is—" "The creature has a designation now," Elena interrupted. "Pterogonicus gentilis. And I expect it to be treated with the same respect as any newly contacted sentient species." She ended the transmission before Hayes could argue further and turned to her new companion. "Ready to meet the neighbors?" she asked, gathering her equipment. "I promise they're mostly harmless, just a bit jumpy." The journey back through the cave system was surprisingly straightforward with the creature, which Elena had begun mentally referring to as gentilis for simplicity, leading the way. Its knowledge of the tunnels was comprehensive, suggesting long-term habitation of the complex. As they emerged into the crimson light of Terrigan Four's twin suns, Elena was greeted by an extraordinary sight. The horizon had repositioned to the canyon floor, its massive bulk dwarfed by the sheer walls rising on either side. Surrounding the ship was a perimeter of defensive drones, their weapon systems clearly powered and targeted on the cave entrance. Beyond the perimeter stood the Drake survey team, their scaled bodies rigid with tension. Even from a distance, Elena could see their skin had paled to the distinctive white-blue of extreme stress. Major Hayes stepped forward, his pulse rifle held at the ready but pointed at the ground, a compromise between preparedness and restraint. "Dr. Voss," he called out, his voice amplified by his suit's external speakers. "Please confirm you are unharmed and acting of your own free will." Elena suppressed a smile at the implication that she might be under some form of mind control. "Confirmed, Major. I am perfectly fine and in complete possession of my faculties." She stepped fully into the sunlight, Gentilis following close behind. A collective gasp rose from the assembled team as the massive creature emerged, its scales shimmering with iridescent colors in the direct sunlight. "Everyone remain calm," Elena announced, raising her hands in a placating gesture. "Gentilis is not aggressive unless threatened. Those defensive drones are more likely to provoke an incident than prevent one." Hayes hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and Elena's expertise. After a tense moment, he signaled to deactivate the drones. They settled to the ground, weapons powering down with an audible whine. Moru stepped forward, his movement stiff with barely controlled fear. "Dr. Voss, you cannot be serious about bringing this destroyer into proximity with our research facilities." Elena placed a hand on Gentilis's nearest appendage, and the creature lowered its massive head to her level. With deliberate movements, she began to stroke the sensitive area beneath its jaw, eliciting the now familiar purring response. The sound echoed across the canyon, causing visible shock among the Drake team. Their rigid postures faltered, neck gills fluttering in confusion. This destroyer, as you call it, is a sentient being with complex emotional responses and intelligence that likely rivals our own, Elena stated firmly. It responded to aggression with aggression, as would any of us. When approached with respect and gentleness, it responds in kind. To demonstrate her point, she removed a container of her soothing solution from her pack and applied it to Gentilis's underside. The creature immediately rolled onto its back, multiple limbs relaxing as it exposed its vulnerable belly for more attention. The sight of the supposedly terrifying predator behaving like an oversized pet receiving a belly rub was so incongruous that Hayes actually laughed out loud, the sound startling in the tense atmosphere. "I'll be damned," he muttered, lowering his rifle completely. The Drake team remained skeptical, their cultural fear too deeply ingrained for such a quick reversal. But Elena's demonstration had at least moved them from terror to cautious curiosity. What is that substance?" Xavier finally asked, taking a tentative step closer. "A simple mixture of hydrating compounds and mild muscle relaxants," Elena explained, continuing her ministrations. "The skin here is surprisingly sensitive, similar in many ways to the gill structures of your own species. Actually, this comparison seemed to resonate with the Drake scientists. Slowly, hesitantly, Xavier approached, his natural scientific curiosity beginning to overcome his instinctive fear. "The bioluminescent patterns," he observed, maintaining a safe distance but leaning forward to study the creature. "They change with its emotional state?" Elena nodded, pleased by the engagement. "Exactly. Blue wavelengths indicate contentment. Red signals aggression or fear. There's a complex language encoded in the patterns. I've only begun to decipher the basics." Over the next several hours, a remarkable transformation occurred. The Drake scientists, led by Xavier's example, gradually moved from terror to fascination. They set up monitoring equipment at a respectful distance, recording the creature's vital signs and behavior patterns as Elena continued to act as intermediary. By sunset, Moru himself had approached close enough to offer a small container of synthesized nutrients that their analysis suggested might be compatible with Gentilis's biology. The creature accepted the offering with surprising delicacy, using one of its smaller appendages to take the container without damaging it. "It understands the concept of gifts," Moru marveled, his scientific training finally overcoming his cultural prejudice. "True sentience, beyond question," Elena smiled, watching as her colleague experienced the same wonder that had driven her career. "Every creature we call monster is simply waiting for someone to look past fear and see the being beneath." Major Hayes approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "The ship's council is requesting a full report. Doctor, they're struggling with the implications of your discovery." "I imagine they are," Elena replied with a slight smile. "Gentilis represents everything our exploration protocols fail to account for. A being that defies classification, that can't be understood through observation alone, that requires engagement rather than study." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "There will be those who argue for containment, for study in controlled conditions. And they will be wrong," Elena said firmly. "Gentilis stays free. We adapt to its presence, not the other way around." The Major regarded her for a long moment before nodding again. "I'll support your recommendation. God knows I've seen enough today to question a few of my own assumptions." As night fell over Terrigan 4, the research team established a temporary camp at a respectful distance from Gentilis's cave. The creature seemed content with this arrangement, occasionally emerging to investigate their activities before returning to its underground home. Elena sat by the camp's small thermal unit, recording her observations from the remarkable day. Around her, the Drake scientists were engaged in animated discussion, their fear replaced by scientific excitement as they compared notes and theories. Xavier approached, offering a container of synthetic protein sustenance, the expedition's standard field rations. "You must eat, Dr. Voss. It has been nearly 30 hours since your last nutritional intake." Elena accepted gratefully, suddenly aware of her exhaustion and hunger. "Thank you, Xavier, and thank you for being willing to reconsider your position on Gentilis." The Drake settled beside her, his scales shifting to the deep green of thoughtful contemplation. "Our species has long been guided by ancestral wisdom," he said after a moment. "The stories of great destroyers shaped our early development, taught us caution in exploration." He gestured toward the cave entrance where Gentilis had disappeared. "But perhaps some of those ancient destroyers were simply misunderstood, as this one was. Perhaps our ancestors never thought to offer— what did you call it?" "A belly rub," Elena supplied with a smile. "Yes, this belly rub. A simple act of kindness instead of fear." Xavier's neck gills fluttered in the Drake expression of amusement. "It seems humans have much to teach us about approaching the unknown. And we have much to learn from your caution," Elena admitted. "I might have benefited from a bit more Drake prudence in my approach." The following days established a pattern of careful study and growing familiarity. Gentilis proved to be not merely tolerant of their presence, but actively curious about their activities. It would watch with evident interest as the scientists set up equipment, occasionally approaching to investigate particularly shiny or noisy devices. Elena continued her role as primary intermediary, but gradually, the other team members established their own modes of communication with the creature. Moru discovered that certain harmonics produced by his species' natural vocalizations seemed to please Gentilis, producing the distinctive purring response. Even Major Hayes found himself drawn into interactions, his military background giving way to wonder as he observed the creature's intelligence firsthand. A week into their extended study, the Horizon received a transmission from Galactic Federation Command that threatened to shatter their fragile new relationship. "They want to what?" Elena demanded, staring at the holographic message in disbelief. Major Hayes looked uncomfortable. "Standard protocol for exceptional xenobiological discoveries. A specialized containment team will arrive within 5 days to transport the specimen to the primary research facility in the Arcturus system." "Gentilis is not a specimen to be transported," Elena snapped, her voice rising. "It's a sentient being with territorial attachments and established patterns. Removing it from this environment could be catastrophic, both for the creature and potentially for anyone attempting to contain it." Hayes raised his hands placatingly. "I'm just delivering the message. Doctor, Command seems particularly interested in the regenerative properties your samples have demonstrated in preliminary analysis." Elena paced the ship's conference room, mind racing. The biochemical samples she had collected from Gentilis had indeed shown remarkable properties, cellular structures that could repair themselves almost instantaneously, protein configurations unlike anything in the Federation database. But the leap from studying freely given samples to capturing a sentient being for exploitation was unconscionable. "We need to change their minds," she said finally, turning to face the assembled team. "We need to make them understand what we're dealing with here." Moru's scales darkened with concern. Federation Command rarely reverses directives once issued, particularly when potential medical applications are involved. "Then we give them something they can't ignore," Elena replied, a plan forming in her mind. Proof of sentience so compelling that even the most bureaucratic mind can't dismiss it. Over the next 3 days, Elena worked tirelessly to document every aspect of Gentilis's behavior that demonstrated intelligence and emotional capacity. She compiled videos of the creature using tools to extract mineral deposits from the canyon walls, evidence of its complex communication system, and most compellingly, its growing relationships with individual team members. Xavier proved particularly valuable in this effort, his natural empathy allowing him to connect with Gentilis in ways that complemented Elena's approach. Together, they developed a rudimentary communication system using bioluminescent patterns and simple gestures. The night before the containment team was scheduled to arrive, Elena made a final, desperate attempt to ensure Gentilis's freedom. Using the ship's most powerful transmission array, she sent a comprehensive data package directly to the Federation's Sentient Rights Council, bypassing the scientific bureaucracy entirely. Attached to the technical data was a personal message, recorded as she sat beside the sleeping form of Gentilis in its cave. "What defines personhood?" she asked the unseen council members. "Is it technological achievement? Gentilis manipulates its environment with purpose and skill. Is it communication? It expresses complex emotions and concepts through bioluminescence and vocalizations. Is it emotional capacity? It forms bonds, shows preferences, experiences joy and sorrow." She gestured to the massive creature beside her. "It's breathing deep and regular in sleep." Or perhaps what truly defines personhood is simpler: the capacity to trust, to overcome fear, and reach out across the divide of difference. Elena placed her hand gently on Gentilis's side, and even in sleep, the creature's scales shifted color in response to her touch. This being trusted me when it had every evolutionary reason not to. The question now is whether we can be worthy of that trust. The message sent. Elena returned to the camp to await the arrival of the containment team. The atmosphere was tense, the Drake scientists unusually quiet as they continued their work with an air of impending loss. Dawn broke over the crimson landscape of Tarragon, the twin suns casting long shadows across the canyon floor. Elena stood at the perimeter of the camp, watching the eastern sky for the approaching transport vessel. Instead, her attention was drawn to a sudden commotion from the direction of the horizon. Major Hayes was jogging toward her, an uncharacteristic expression of excitement on his normally stoic face. "Dr. Voss," he called as he approached. "Transmission from Federation Command. Priority Alpha." Elena's heart sank. Priority Alpha typically indicated non-negotiable directives, often involving military support. Hayes reached her, slightly out of breath. "The containment operation has been canceled," he announced, breaking into a rare smile. "Your appeal to the Sentient Rights Council worked. They've classified Gentilis as a provisional sentient species with full protection under Federation law." Relief flooded through Elena so intensely that she had to steady herself against a nearby equipment case. "They accepted our evidence?" "More than accepted," Hayes confirmed. "They're dispatching a specialized first contact team to establish formal diplomatic relations. Your documentation was apparently compelling beyond reasonable dispute." The news spread quickly through the camp, transforming the somber mood to one of celebration. The Drake team, particularly, seemed vindicated by the decision, their initial fear now completely replaced by scientific and cultural respect. Xavier approached Elena, his scales shimmering with the bright blues of joy. "You have done a great thing, Dr. Voss. Not only for Gentilis, but for my people as well. You have helped us confront an ancient fear and find wisdom instead of terror." Elena smiled, touched by his words. "Science at its best doesn't just categorize the universe. It helps us understand our place within it. Sometimes that means recognizing when our instincts lead us astray." The diplomatic team arrived 3 days later, a diverse group of specialists in xenobiology, linguistics, and interspecies relations. To Elena's satisfaction, they approached their task with appropriate humility, deferring to her expertise and the relationships she and her team had already established. Gentilis responded to the newcomers with cautious curiosity, clearly distinguishing between Elena's original team, now accepted as familiar, and these unknown entities. The creature's discriminating behavior provided yet more evidence of its intelligence and complex social awareness. In the weeks that followed, a remarkable partnership developed. The diplomatic team established a permanent research station at a respectful distance from Gentilis's territory, designed with input from the creature itself, which showed clear preferences about proximity and placement. Elena found herself in the unexpected role of cultural intermediary, helping both humans and Drake overcome centuries of monster mythology to recognize the person within the fearsome exterior. Most remarkably, Gentilis began to demonstrate skills that even Elena hadn't anticipated. It showed an aptitude for symbolic representation, eventually associating specific visual patterns with concepts and objects, the beginnings of a shared language. 3 months after her initial encounter in the canyon, Elena stood at the entrance of Gentilis's cave, preparing for a bittersweet departure. Her expertise was needed for a new assignment, and though she had fought to remain, the Federation's decision was final. "I'll return as soon as possible," she said softly to the massive creature that had emerged to see her off. She had no way of knowing if Gentilis understood the concept of temporary separation, but she felt compelled to explain, nonetheless. The creature lowered its head to her level, the luminescent patterns across its scales shifting in what Elena had come to recognize as a complex emotional statement, something approximating sorrow mixed with acceptance. Gently, Elena placed her hands on either side of the creature's massive face, looking directly into its glowing eyes. "You changed everything, you know, not just for yourself, but for how we see the unknown." Gentilis responded with a low, melodious sound that reverberated through Elena's chest. It was a vocalization she had never heard before, something new, created perhaps specifically for this moment. With careful movements, the creature extended one of its smaller appendages toward Elena. Balanced delicately on the tip was a single scale, shed naturally, but preserved somehow, its surface etched with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed gently in the dim light. Elena accepted the gift with the reverence it deserved, recognizing it as both a scientific treasure and a personal memento. "Thank you," she whispered, securing the scale in her specimen case. As she walked away toward the waiting transport, Elena glanced back one last time. Gentilis stood framed in the cave entrance, massive and magnificent, no longer a monster, but a colleague, perhaps even a friend. On the journey back to Federation space, Elena spent hours documenting her experiences, knowing that her report would reshape protocols for future expeditions. The official designation for the species, Pterogonicus gentilis, was formally accepted into the Xenobiological Registry, with a special notation regarding its sentient status. But it was a single image that captured the public imagination when news of the discovery reached the core worlds. Elena, dwarfed by the massive creature, her hands gently stroking its iridescent scales as its eyes closed in contentment. The photograph became an iconic symbol of the Federation's exploration initiative, reproduced in educational materials and cultural exhibits throughout human and Drake worlds alike. It represented everything Elena had always believed about the frontier of space, that understanding required more than observation, that connection transcended difference, and that sometimes the most profound discoveries came not from analysis, but from a simple willingness to reach out. In scientific circles, the Voss approach became a methodology taught to xenobiology students across the Federation, an approach that balanced caution with engagement, respect with curiosity. Among the Drake, ancient mythologies underwent a significant revision. The terrifying destroyers of legend were recontextualized as powerful but complex beings, worthy of respect rather than fear. Cultural historians noted that Drake children now included positive monster figures in their stories. A profound shift in a species whose evolution had been shaped by the need to avoid predators. A year after her departure, Elena returned to Tarragonfur. The research station had expanded into a small settlement, with representatives from various Federation species working together to study not only Gentilis, but the unique ecosystem of the planet. As her shuttle descended toward the landing pad, Elena caught sight of a massive figure waiting at the perimeter, unmistakable even from a distance. Gentilis had grown even larger in her absence, its armored plates more pronounced, and its bioluminescent patterns more complex. But as Elena emerged from the shuttle, the creature's reaction was immediate and unmistakable. The scales across its body rippled with the blue-green patterns of joy. Elena approached without hesitation, her own face breaking into a smile as she reached out to her old friend. "Hello again," she said softly. "I've missed you." The creature lowered its massive head, and with the gentleness that had first astonished her, pressed its face against her outstretched hand. Dr. Xavian, now the permanent Drake representative at the station, approached with evident pleasure. "It has waited for you," he said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of excitement. "Every day, it has watched the sky." Elena felt a lump form in her throat. "I told you I'd come back," she said to Gentilis, stroking the sensitive area beneath its jaw. The familiar purr rumbled through the air, a sound that had once terrified an entire expedition, but now symbolized the profound connection between species. As she stood there, surrounded by colleagues who had once been paralyzed by fear, but now worked alongside Gentilis with easy familiarity, Elena reflected on the power of that first moment of connection, the instant when fear had given way to curiosity, when a monster had become a marvel. In the vast expanse of space, with its infinite diversity and constant surprises, perhaps the most valuable trait wasn't caution or even courage, but the simple willingness to offer understanding instead of fear, to look at the terrifying unknown and, instead of running away, offer a gentle touch. Sometimes, even the most fearsome monsters just needed a belly rub.